Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, May the 7th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. First part of Citizens Forum is usually the Walter and Jack show, but Walter's under the weather today. So Vic Derman, and we're going to be talking about certainly the most expensive issue in our city, and one of the most important in terms of, do we do something smart or do we do something really stupid?
Yeah, exactly that, Jack.
Sewage treatment.
The very one.
Yeah.
And really where we're at with sewage treatment right now, and that is the CRD is at something of an impasse. The Esquimalt has refused to rezone McLaughlin Point in the manner the CRD would like, and the CRD has asked the Minister of the Environment, the Honourable Mary Pollock, to overrule the Esquimalt and force the zoning through and the project through. I am of the opinion that that would not be a good idea.
Now, you're a Saanich City Councillor and you're also on the CRD, so you've been involved with this from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm a CRD director, and I'm also one of the directors that's on the Core Area Liquid Waste Committee, which is managing the project. All directors from the affected municipalities are on that committee.
And let's just list the affected municipalities.
They are Saanich,
Okay.
Victoria, Oak Bay, Esquimalt, View Royal, Colwood, Langford.
Okay, and of those, Colwood is planning to pull out and build the kind of sewage treatment system that a lot of people would like to build?
Kind of pull out. Work within the parameters of the committee, but has sought permission, has been given it to explore, as you say, a different option, more based around resource recovery.
Yes, a tertiary.
Tertiary, recovering resources, so forth.
Okay, so my question about this is always, why have our city councillors who are on the CRD, and I'm going to list them off because I think people should know who were the people who are most responsible for getting us into what I would call a real wrong direction. But more equally importantly, against the wishes of the people they're supposed to be representing, because in both, like you're from Saanich, but there are 4 other Saanich councillors, and I think 4 from the city of Victoria.
Yeah, there are 4.
The population is split at best. I think most people are very opposed to this idea or want something better, but the councillors keep voting in a block to push this through.
Well, if you're going to ask me why, my answer is I have no idea.
Yeah.
Other than perhaps people got themselves entrenched and are finding it difficult to take a different tack. Because I think there's ample evidence to suggest we should at least do 2 things. One, we should have the current project independently evaluated to see if it provides value for money and best environmental benefit.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a radical proposal.
No, I don't think so. And
secondly,
that we open up the process with what's called a new request for expressions of interest that would allow the best and brightest ideas to come forward and be evaluated. Why not?
Okay, so can you just repeat those 2 things? Because I
think...
Sure.
One is that you get clearly independent evaluation of whether the current project gives value for money and best environmental benefit. And secondly, you open up the process by having what's called a second request for expressions of interest, which would allow the best and brightest of ideas to come forward and be evaluated, and the most current technologies and approaches.
So to me, that makes complete sense. There's the whole issue of whether or not we even need a sewage treatment.
Yeah, but that's not within my jurisdiction, and really,
But I just want to throw that on the table too.
Yeah, no,
a lot of the scientists say that what we're doing in the ocean is as good as we could do on land if we want to.
And the answer to that is, if you are going to treat, you want to do it in a manner where you really are getting substantial benefit from it. And I think it's quite probable you can. You know, when Minister Penner, then Environment Minister, first mandated us to treat in 2006 and into 2007, he set some provincial objectives. One was that we would minimize the cost to taxpayers by maximizing recovery resources and generating offsetting revenues. Two, that we would optimally locate infrastructure to make sure we did that. So you put it in places where it could make sure that resources could be maximized. Third, that we would make every attempt to maximize the response to climate change by making sure that what we did reduced GHG production in the region as much, or greenhouse gases, as much as possible. And finally, that we would really show innovation with things like district energy. He even said dock-style green innovation and so forth. They were really supportable objectives at that time, and they remain so. I would argue that we aren't even close to them or accomplishing them.
In fact, I would argue that we're as far away as we could possibly get.
Well, there is some resource recovery in the project,
Okay.
but the project was never designed around resource recovery. If you want to really maximize resource recovery, and that gives you a chance to reduce costs because you can get value out of those resources,
Well,
and especially life cycle costs, then you design around it. You know, and
Yes.
say, this is our goal, and then you build according to that goal. Our goal is to maximize response to climate change. You build around that. We didn't do that. We picked a design, and then we kind of said, well, let's add some resource recovery on top of it. We put infrastructure in the wrong places, and so it was very, very hard to do that. And I think we've got kind of a minimal amount of resource recovery, and we've got kind of a minimal response to climate change compared to what we could have done.
Okay, so I think what you're saying and what you've been saying from the beginning is we can do better than
Absolutely.
this.
Absolutely. I think, well, can I say with 100% certainty? No. I can say two things though. I think it's very likely we could do better. Everything that I see in the industry and where it's going suggests we could. And secondly, I can say, I think with 100% certainty, we haven't done our due diligence. We haven't done a good enough job of investigating what these alternatives are to make absolutely sure we've made the best choice.
So, you know, we all who are watching this live somewhere in this city, so I just want to read off a list of the city councillors who have kind of been the ones to move us in the direction in which we have gone over the last few years, which is towards a project that has never really been, as you say, independently evaluated, and a process that has never allowed the best ideas to come in.
In my opinion, that would be accurate.
And in my opinion also. So, I mean, Dean Fortin, the Mayor of Victoria, and I'm just saying, we citizens, if you don't like where we are, these are the people who can make it happen, and we should be calling them up and letting them know that, you know, we expect them to do what we want and expect them to do something, the best thing for us. So again, Dean Fortin, the Mayor of Victoria, Judy Brownoff, who's a Saanich City Councillor, Susan Bryce, who is a Saanich City Councillor, Denise Blackwell, who's from Langford, Leif Wergland, again from Saanich, Jeff Young of Victoria, Ben Izzet of Victoria, John Herbert from Oak Bay, and Lanny Seaton from Langford, and also Saanich Mayor Frank Leonard. I think that's the list of people who are our city councillors who have chosen to take us where we now are. I think we can do better. I know a lot of people in the city think we can do better, and I think we can ask more from our councillors and CRD directors. And you know, I think a list of who's been trying to move us in the direction that I think most people in the city want to go is Vic and Graham Hill of View Royal, and Barb Desjardins, who's the mayor of Esquimalt, and Carol Hamilton and Judith Cullington from Colwood. So there's the list, and you know, we should be in touch with our city councillors more and tell them what we think.
In terms of where people have been at and with the project, I don't think your list is inaccurate. You identify the people who have generally been supporting the direction we have gone and continue to go. and those who have raised concerns and tried to open the project up and allow it to potentially go in a better direction.
Yeah, so here we stand.
You know, Jack, if I could, one of the problems has been that we seem to have taken right from the start a very single-minded approach to saying, here is one project and this is what we're going to do, and an absolutely baffling reluctance to fully investigate anything else. You know, and that's the part that amazes me. If we had looked broadly, and we have done some studies of even a distributed system, but they were preliminary to start with, and they were done by consultants under the direction of staff running the project. There's not a clear independence there. Even those studies, or even one of them in particular, showed that a distributed system could be as much as 500 or 600% better in reducing GHGs, greenhouse gases. That's huge. You know, that study estimated that the costs of distributed system would be extremely high. But since that time, all sorts of evidence has come forward, including projects on the ground, one just over in Blaine, Washington, that have shown that those estimates were way too high, and that a properly built distributed system could be competitive in cost to what we're doing, or possibly even lower, especially when you look at the costs over the life cycle to operate it. So it just amazes me that I still see the same arguments trotted out, the same reluctance and unwillingness to do anything better. I can't understand why.
Yeah, it's like we're choosing to buy, you know, a car from a manufacturer who's famous for, you know, breakdowns, when we can do much, much better.
I used to say we bought our 1975 Yugo for $500,000, and now we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
You know, let's see if there's something better out there than a 1975 Yugo.
So what did they do in Blaine, Washington?
Well, in Blaine, Washington, they have a plant that is a filtration plant, similar to Dockside Green, although a much more modern version. The point being, when that study, and the plant, by the way, is expandable and it has room for future operation and so forth, including the opportunity tanks that would allow expansion and so forth, the plant costs in the range of $30 million to build. When they did the 2009-2010 study, they were indicating that distributed plants would cost $200 million or more.
So the people who did the study that we're basing things on are way out of line with
well, they were, absolutely. It would appear so. Now, again, I would like to see that broad examination, that chance for people to put in bids for a different system.
So in Blaine, Washington, they put in a plant for $30 million. How many people does it serve, do you know?
I can't tell you the number of people exactly, but I can tell you the amount of megaliters is somewhere, and that's the capacity of it, 1 million liters, somewhere around 8 megaliters, expandable up to 12 or 14.
Okay.
To give you a sense of where we're at, we need in this region somewhere around 85 to 100 megaliters. So, you know, maximum you would be, and even we have to have some excess capacity for wet.
Now they did that for 30 million.
Yeah, they did it for 30 million. Now
we need 10 times as much.
Well, maybe a little bit more, because
let's say we need 20 times as much.
Under provincial regulations, we have to have excess capacity for wet season.
Okay, so let's say 20 times as much. But it's still only, it's maybe 4/5 the cost of the current plan.
Well,
and they haven't broken ground yet.
You do have to add on other costs. The current plant itself doesn't cost that much. The current plant plus piping, plus going under the harbor, plus a pipeline out to Heartland, plus the infrastructure out at Heartland, which is very, very expensive choice, costs around 780 to 800 million if it comes in on budget.
Right.
Now, my expectation is that you might be able to do that kind of system that Blaine has, one plant of at least, within the same cost range and possibly cheaper.
Okay. And what are the benefits?
I should point out also
Okay.
that we are doing a secondary treatment system,
Yes.
which is somewhat minimal treatment. It meets the current regulations, and that's about it. The plant in Blaine is tertiary treatment, which is a higher level and produces much purer water out of it and removes more contaminants. You still would have to provide something, some infrastructure to deal with the biosolids, the material that you take out of the sewage. That would still happen, as with the current plant.
So, again, a lot of people are concerned about what we're doing. I'm certainly concerned about what we're doing. It seems possible that we can do better. It seems that in Blaine they are doing better.
It would appear so.
Yeah. So, again, you know, really, it's up to all of us, I think, to do.
Yeah, and we really have to put it in the context of the fact that recent reports, again, from the IPCC on climate change have really emphasized the fact that climate change is in fact a looming catastrophe of a magnitude that humanity quite possibly has never seen before, and that we really have a limited time to do something about it. We can do something about it. We have some time, but not much. So we should be moving with everything we do to say, is this going to maximize our response to climate change and stop us from creating a world that might be almost unlivable? When we are spending 800 million or thereabouts, or hopefully not more, for this kind of infrastructure, it should be an absolute goal that climate change will have to be, response will be maximized when we build that infrastructure. In this day and age, that should be just a given, you know. Well, we're not doing it.
How big of a impact is that, one way or the other?
Well,
I never
to
think
give you
of
an
soup,
example,
yeah.
the current project suggests that it will reduce in its lifespan the GHG production by about 300,000 tons. That's its 50-year lifespan or whatever. That's, they point out, the equivalent of taking about 1,200 cars off the road. That's substantial. You know, I'm glad we're doing that and not doing nothing. But the indications are, and you would have to wait to find out, but that a good resource recovery-based distributed system could probably be 500 to 600% better. So that might be the equivalent in GHG reduction of taking 7,000 or 8,000 cars off the road. That is a huge difference and would be a huge step for this region. Absolutely huge.
I just think we're getting saddled with a huge expense that is not as good as we can do. And I just don't.
That's my fear too, and it really depresses me that on my watch, if you would, when I'm part of the process, I haven't been able to convince others that we at least have to make absolutely sure that what we're doing is the best thing. You know, there have been certain panels and reviews and so forth, but they have mainly been guided by people committed to the project or committed to what goes on in the industry. We haven't had something where independent climate change experts and environmental experts and experts in emerging technology have been able to come along and say, yes, this is the best you can do. You know, we need that. We desperately need it.
And in all fields, everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, number one is, of course, cars and transportation. And again,
well,
we're going nowheresville.
You know, basically, in some of the recent reports, one of the things they've suggested that if you can stay under a 2-degree rise in temperature, and to do that, you probably have to stay on under 450 parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That you're going to have a different world, but probably one that's not dramatically different and that you can live in. If you go up to over 2 degrees and probably get feedback happening naturally and wind up at 3.5, 4, 4.5 degrees, it's going to be a very different world and quite possibly a hostile world. Now, there was also analysis done by some of where are we at with our current promises and things we said we will honor. And the answer is we're likely to see a 3.5 to 4 degree rise by the end of this century.
Which is disaster.
That's unacceptable. And we aren't even meeting those commitments. So do we have to change?
Yes.
Absolutely. And we better do it fast. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it's funny, here we are sitting talking and, what's coming at us is not going to be pleasant. I just want to read
We're
one more
wandering
time.
through the tunnel and we see a light coming and we realize it's not the end of the tunnel, it's a train.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good idea to try to avoid that train.
On the issue of sewage treatment, which is what we talked about most, I just want to read again the list of city councillors who I think have brought us into not the best place we want to be, and please contact them and tell them what you think. Dean Fortin of Victoria, Judy Brownoff and Susan Bryce of Saanich, Denise Blackwell of Langford, Leif Wergland, Saanich, Jeff Young, Victoria, Ben Izzet, Victoria, Frank Leonard, Saanich, John Herbert of Oak Bay, and Lanny Seaton of Langford. Vic, thank you very much for doing this.
It's always a pleasure, Jack, and I hope your readers will say to people that are in power right now, we do need to do better. It's time for some leadership.
We do need to do better, and on this sewage treatment issue for sure. Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Hello and welcome to the second segment of Citizens Forum. Our guest in this segment is Carol Pickup of Saanich, and we're going to be talking about one of the most important issues in the country, which is healthcare and the ongoing corporate attack on healthcare and the attempts to privatize it. So we're going to start talking about the Canada Health Accord, which I think has just been cancelled or is about to be cancelled.
It expired at the end of March of this year.
Okay, so the Canada Health Accord, I don't know what it is, and I have a feeling 99% of the people who are watching this, or maybe 90%, don't.
The very first Canada Health Accord was established in 2004 and was to run for 10 years. So that's why it was up in March of 2014. It's an agreement between the provinces and territories and the federal government to fund health care, primarily those issues that are under the Canada Health Act. The Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, has refused to renegotiate the Canada Accord with the provinces and has basically moved away from any kind of an accord or any kind of plan for Medicare in the future, other than to restrict funding to the provinces to the point that provinces will have more costs of health care downloaded onto them.
So, Mr. Harper, I guess you said this is the first one, so we didn't have one before 2004.
We didn't have a health accord, but we did always have a Canada Health Act, and initially the cost sharing between provinces and the federal government was 50-50.
Okay.
It went down in recent times to about 17 from the federal government and the rest from the provinces.
That's right. So the funding for our healthcare system always used to be 50-50, and now it's 17% from the federal government, 83% from the provincial government.
Yeah. The cuts started with Paul Martin under the Liberal federal government back in the 1990s in order to accomplish a huge surplus. If you recall Mr. Martin bragging about a huge surplus. Ever since then it's gone downhill, and until 2004, to the credit of the Harper government at that time, there was a Canada Accord agreement signed between the federal government and the provinces, albeit it was not an adequate amount of money.
Yeah. The money is very important because, I think what's happening is that the system is being deliberately made to not work. There's huge amounts of money being spent on it, but I think they have quite deliberately, especially by closing thousands and thousands and thousands of hospital beds, it doesn't matter how much money you put into it. If you don't have the beds, then, and you don't put any money into
community care.
Into community care and health, So money is being taken away from our hospitals, which is why there's the problems there. And that money is being given by the billions of dollars to the drug companies. And that's a big part of the problem. Money from our hospitals, our money, taken from our hospitals, given to the drug companies.
Absolutely. The highest rising, or the fastest rising cost in the whole healthcare system are drugs. And that's why we need a national pharmacare program, which again, the Harper government has refused to look at. It has been proven in many, many countries worldwide, and I especially think of Australia, that if a country buys drugs bulk, and if they don't have ridiculous long-term protection of pharma drugs against generic drugs, you can save billions and billions of dollars within the system.
So that's what's happening in our country. We never read about it in the media because, of course, it's not in, this is the corporate media, it's not in their interest to tell us, but we're overpaying for drugs, and even worse than that, the drugs themselves are often unneeded, useless, and worst of all, they cause other health problems.
Absolutely. Every drug has at least one side effect, if not many. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors do not keep up with what drugs do, and particularly the side effects. Best person to consult about drugs, quite frankly, is your pharmacist.
And the doctors have nothing else they can use. I mean, if somebody comes in with any problem, the only treatment, because of course the drug companies control our universities, I assume, and certainly control medical education in this country.
Absolutely, and they provide monies for all kinds of seminars. They give most of the money for research on drugs, which needs to be challenged because of course it should be an independent body, like of course what we have in BC at UBC. That Therapeutic Initiatives Group have been worth their weight in gold in scrutinizing drugs. If you recall, the provincial government stopped their funding last year, and because there was so much of an outcry, some of their funding has been restored, only half of what they had prior to the cancellation, however. That group at UBC really had a good handle on drugs and did not approve any drugs that they felt had any problems associated with them. So here we go again.
The provincial government tried to close them down.
Exactly.
And we voted this provincial government back in. You know, it's a real problem because, you know, they just don't work for us, talking about our provincial politicians.
It's ideological. It's ideological at the federal level, and it's ideological at our provincial level right now. We have governments at both levels that believe that private is good and public is bad. Okay. So you notice at the federal level, all the public services are being attacked. The CBC, postal delivery, health care, all of things that we have assumed as Canadians are part of our makeup are being attacked. Yeah. and reduced.
Yeah, it's a massive problem because none of this is happening to benefit us. You know, the media tells us, well, what's the line about healthcare? They tell us that public healthcare doesn't work and we should privatize. That's the message we get from the media, which is absolutely, completely a lie.
It is an absolute lie. If it was being administered properly,
exactly.
Funded properly, if there was more focus on keeping people well as opposed to simply treating them when they're in hospital, the Canada Health Act is weak in that the only two things it actually addresses funding-wise are doctors' fees and acute care, whereas we know that the place to save money in the healthcare system is to put much more money into health promotion, keeping people well, addressing the real determinants of health. Poverty, #1 cause of illness in a lot of people.
Yes.
Lack of access to proper resources. A clean environment, and we know what's happened there too federally. All the firing of scientists and cutting back on environmental assessments, etc.
And poisoning us every chance they get,
Exactly.
along with the provincial
Just
government.
exactly the opposite moves on the part of the federal government to that which they should be doing.
So, #1, and I agree with you 100%, is the #1 cause of illness is in our society is probably poverty. Yeah.
And to our disgrace in British Columbia, we have the highest child poverty rates in Canada, have had for several years now. We also have high poverty rates in adults because of children are not isolated from adults. And that alone is a disgrace, but it's also a ridiculous position for this government to be accepting, either government to be accepting, because we could cut back on the cost of Medicare if we were funding supports to children and families. For example, this latest thing where the provincial government is deducting child support payments from social service payments. How ridiculous is that when a single mother can barely get by and can hardly feed her children without that extra money? And yet this government is doing nothing.
Is this something new, or is this the way it's always been?
It's got worse, much worse under the current provincial government. Fortunately, the opposition has brought in a bill, a plan to end poverty in British Columbia. But of course that will go nowhere with this government because it doesn't believe in moving down those roads.
Yeah, well, I don't believe that much in the opposition party anymore either, but that's another story.
Well, at least that is a move in the right direction.
Yeah. You know, when we're talking about health care, I think maybe the most important message we can put out is that we can do a lot better. We can be healthier as a society.
Absolutely.
And why not?
Well, and it's things like access to affordable, decent housing.
Yes, so important.
Absolutely critical, but that again, that goes back to the poverty issue. If you know what the rents are in Victoria, right, the market rents, they're atrocious. I coordinate a seniors advocacy group out of Quadra Village Community Centre, and one of the major issues we find is lack of access to affordable, decent housing for people on fixed and low incomes.
Yeah, because there's a lot of not good housing in this community, and
absolutely,
you know, and a lot of it is not well built, and I'm talking about the upscale places too.
Right.
You know, they're just...
Well, there's just not enough oversight being carried out by governments at all levels, including municipal for that matter. We should be insisting on first-class housing being built, and particularly in the area where we have subsidized social housing. And of course, that's another bone of contention. There is virtually no social housing being built by the government. They're relying on religious groups, on nonprofit societies to build any housing that's being built. The government has literally pulled out of the building of housing.
Yeah. Personally, I think there is a plan basically to destroy our society, because that's what I see our governments doing at all levels. And when you see them doing it, you think, well, this must be what they want to do.
Well, there's certainly, I think, a plan on the part of right-wing reactionist governments to move away from social good, funding social good issues and not putting resources into things like health care, like housing, education, etc.
You know, it's interesting, Carol, because what they also do is they take our money and waste it. For example, you know, we got these numbers just a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned them on the show, that it costs to have a shelter mat on a church floor or a floor somewhere. The cost to us is about $25,000 a year to pay for that thin mat on a concrete floor in places that are really, really not good for the people who are staying there. That's $25,000 a year. We could build supportive housing units for people for about $16,000 to $17,000 a year. So these crooks who run our society take more money to torture people instead of treating them like...
Well, it's absolutely short-sightedness, of course, because we know that to keep a person in jail costs $40,000 a year. And go figure that. And a good percentage of the people in our jails in British Columbia are First Nations, who, of course, suffer from poverty and lack of access to all of the determinants of health we've talked about.
And when you have less poverty, you have less crime and a better society.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It doesn't take a Philadelphia lawyer to think this out, but if you're ideologically bound to a notion that free enterprise is the be-all and end-all, that social good isn't necessarily what a government should be providing, then you're not going to support social good projects or provide the resources for them. And this is what's happening with Mr. Harper. He's in bed with the private sector, period. And you talked about the amount of monies that we have taken from us in taxes and so on. Guess how much money goes to these oil companies and these private people in the way of subsidies from the federal government? Billions. I mean, literally billions. There's enough money being given to the oil companies, for example, that we could probably fund a full-fledged healthcare system, including community care, including residential care, assisted living, etc. It's a question of priorities. And this government's priorities are not on the common good. They believe everything belongs in the private sector. And it's about time Canadians told them that this is not the Canadian way, because it isn't the Canadian way. I'm fourth generation Canadian. And if my mother, for example, who I absolutely idolized, if she could see what was going on, she would be furious, absolutely furious. And she would certainly tell me to get on it and activate.
Yeah. So there is a war being carried out against us, and you know, we've got to come to grips with what these people are trying, because they're destroying our society. Yes. They're building a nice society for the people at the very top.
And spending billions of dollars on war, providing armaments to countries what we have no business providing armaments to. We're just escalating the wars that are happening in the Middle East, etc. Why are we doing that? We used to be, under Lester Pearson, if you recall, a Liberal Prime Minister, a peacekeeping nation. We decided that that's what we wanted to be, a peacekeeping nation. So we sent troops in to peacekeep, to provide schools, to provide all kinds of amenities to these countries in order to try and move things to a more peaceful situation. We've completely lost that reputation in the world. In fact, Canada's reputation in the world right now distresses me incredibly as a fourth generation Canadian. We've lost the wonderful reputation we used to have, Canada, and we've now become something very, very different.
Yeah. So it's up to us again. We're the only ones who can fix this up. Our governments are lost to us. You wanted to mention, who are the groups who want to see our Canadian Medicare system privatized?
Oh, well, of course, the big pharma, doctors who believe in a private system where they can charge whatever they like. And you know, only have to look to the south of us to see the horrible situation that Obama has faced when he's tried to bring any kind of reform into the American system. I worked in the American system for a year in San Francisco. And I had an uncle come down and have a stroke. He was charged for every single thing that was done for him, including back rub lotion, aspirins. That is a terrible system, and unfortunately the changes that Obama has been able to get through, mainly Republican-based government, unfortunately, are not going to do the job. There's still going to be people falling through the cracks. And we're moving in that direction. And we're moving in the wrong direction.
And it's not we're moving, it's they, the corporations who run this country, are pushing us because they own the media and they control the politicians.
Yep.
Well, I don't know, we got 1 minute left, so, but I think
we can
do better.
We can do better, and we've got to hold our politicians to account. We need to do everything possible in terms of writing to them, of using Facebook, of using any means whatsoever to convince them that this is all going in the wrong direction. Yeah. Having come from municipal government, I would start there, because I think municipal governments do have a role to play. And they've been downloaded by the provincial government as well.
I just want to mention, we've only got 30 seconds left. I want to mention there is a court case moving forward.
Yes, against a private clinic established by Brian Day, Dr. Brian Day in Vancouver.
But if this case is lost,
it opens the door to private clinics,
this case
which is against the Canada Health Act in every respect.
Okay, so this court case, when is it going to court?
It's going to court in September, as I understand it.
2 or 3 months from now. The entire healthcare system is at risk. Carol, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack, for having me. As usual, a pleasure.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, May the 7th in Victoria. I'd like to thank again our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff who makes it all happen. I'd also like to thank somebody who watches the show, Sheila McCulloch, who sent the whole crew a very positive message, and nice to get. Thank you, Sheila. Our guest in this segment is Anthony Hamilton, and Anthony, you sent me you sent me a link to a short video that you had done, which I thought was very interesting, and you were standing in front of the very beautiful Queen Elizabeth Park in Vancouver, and saying that Queen Elizabeth Park used to be, I think, a gravel pit.
A rock quarry of some kind.
A rock quarry,
yeah.
okay. Very much like Butchart Gardens here. And once people had finished using it for that purpose, you know, it could have been changed into many things, and it was changed into what really is a very beautiful park and a beautiful garden. And the idea was we can change our lives in that kind of way. We can be what we want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was so I think the video that you're referring to is called Cultivating Your Power. And so the key idea then is cultivating. And that's why I used the example of Queen Elizabeth Park, because of course you plant the seeds in the ground and the plants grow. So cultivation is sort of the theme of that park. And that was the theme of the video. So the idea then is that each of us can cultivate our confidence, we can cultivate our self-image, we can cultivate beliefs, attitudes, emotional intelligence, and that kind of thing. And so the exciting thing that caught my attention when I was watching your show a couple of weeks ago, you were talking with Will, and this idea of a new paradigm came up. You know, we need a new paradigm for something. And so this new paradigm that I wanted to talk about today, this was the reason I contacted you, was that there is a new paradigm, but a lot of people aren't really familiar with it, you know, and that is a new paradigm in understanding what it means to be human and the fact that we can cultivate our brain. Now, there was some discoveries made in the mid-90s which have come to be known as neuroplasticity. And a lot of people have never heard about this, but it's causing a huge revolution in psychology. And what it comes down to is the fact that each of us can cultivate new brain circuits or new brain cells simply by thinking in a certain way. So there's a lot of literature happening now about this. There's a lot of books being written about it. One of the most recent ones is a book called The Brain That Changes Itself by a Dr. Norman Deutsch. And the New York Times said, science meets self-help. So this is, my interest is really in self-help, but also a scientific paradigm or a scientific viewpoint around self-help. So the idea that we can grow our brain, that we can change our brain, that we can cultivate new moods, new talents, new abilities, is an idea that's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But it's only in the past 15 or so years that it's now suddenly become a scientific fact.
Well, can I give you an example of somebody like myself who might want to make a change, and you can point, is that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think my whole life, I've always, just because that's the way my brain works, worried about the negative instead of rejoicing about the positive.
Right.
And I've always wanted to change that. And, you know, it's not the end of the world, but that's sort of the way I've often worked. And I've always wanted to be a bit better in that way because I'd be happier. So is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Well, that's exactly right, yeah. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, but from what I understand, negativity is hardwired into the brain. It's more important than positivity. Because obviously from an evolutionary standpoint, being aware of danger, learning from fear, from danger, something happening that's bad to us, has a value in saving our lives, right?
Okay.
So it seems to be that negative things have a greater impact on us than positive things. But it's easy to cultivate a positive attitude. And all it takes is simply, well, what I do is I teach people to write down a list. So this is an old technique. I mean, if you write down a list of reasons to be happy, and you've got 5 or 10 or 15 or 50 things on that list, and you simply read that list over once a day, that will change your attitude, and I believe change your brain. Because focusing on positive things. Now, if you think about it, for example, I think of some positive things. I have a new grandson and a granddaughter, right? So as soon as I think about them, I feel good. Now, that feeling is somehow connected to the thought, connected to the wiring in my brain and my body, right? So that's a neural circuit. So by reading that list over, what I'm doing is I'm stimulating those neural circuits. And according to what they've discovered now in Harvard University and other places, by doing something like that on a regular basis, a few minutes a day, for a matter of weeks perhaps, they can measure the changes that take place in your brain. And of course you can feel the changes in your body because you feel better. Now, one thing that I find fascinating is the fact that when you look at me, I'm in the physical world. You're using a certain part of your brain to see me. But when you close your eyes and you imagine your family, or you imagine going home tonight and having dinner, you're using virtually the same part of your brain. So the part of you that sees the outer world and the part of you that sees the inner world is essentially the same part. So when you learn to see happier things in the world, when you learn to feel happier yourself, you're going to see more examples of things that are positive in the world. So literally your world is going to change because you've changed your thinking about it. And that's pretty exciting, I think. Yeah. So that's a new paradigm. That's the paradigm that I write about in my book and that I wanted to talk about today.
Okay. So once again, what I have to do tonight or tomorrow, because I'm also a procrastinator, is to just write down 5, 10, or 15 things that are good in my life and read this list over once a day.
That's all you have to do.
You know what? It makes sense to me.
It makes sense. It's easy, right?
Yeah,
it's easy.
It's certainly
now,
easy.
if you think about it, if you wanted to build your muscles, if you want to build up the muscles in your arms, let's say, what would you do? Well, you would take a weight and you would pick it up, right? And you would do some exercises, and that over a period of very little time, a matter of days or weeks perhaps, would have a measurable effect on the strength of that arm and the strength of those muscle fibers, right? Now, if I drink a cup of coffee, which I often do, it's not going to have any effect on my arm because I have enough muscle fibers already to drink that coffee, right? To hold that coffee cup. So what I have to do is I have to add resistance. I have to overcome some resistance, like excess weight, in order to build the muscle. It's the same thing with the mind. I've taught this technique to lots of people, and I'll say to them, hey, have you read your successes list, or have you read your happiness list? Oh, gee, I forgot. You know, why? Because we have resistance to doing it, right? So you have to overcome that resistance to doing this new thing. If you do it long enough, then it becomes automatic. And of course, after a few weeks, then your feelings are going to change. You're going to have sort of a new set point for happiness, perhaps, in your mind and in your body.
You wanted to talk a bit about future memory.
Yes.
Now I have no idea what that is, but
most people don't. Well, I'll tell you what it is. There's a couple of things that they discovered using this functional MRI. One, we talked about neuroplasticity. So the fact that they can look inside the brain now as people are thinking, they can actually see the neural circuits firing when people think. So what they've discovered is that we can change the brain, we can grow new parts to the, well, not new parts, but we can strengthen the neural connections and we can grow new connections. The other thing that they discovered, which a lot of people haven't picked up on, is what's been called future memory. Now this term, future memory, I did a search on it today, just before I came over, on Google. There were 985 million hits. So future memory is something that's been written about, it's been researched, and a Canadian scientist at the U of T, and also worked at Harvard, his name is Endel Tolving. He is, or now he's retired, but he was one of the, if not the most preeminent scientists researching memory. So he studied memory for his whole academic career, and when he started looking inside the MRI, or the functional MRI, to look inside people's brains, he realized that when people are daydreaming, they're using the exact same neural circuits as they do when they remember something. So we typically think of memory as retrieving information from the past. We think of the brain as a tape recorder, and we're sort of replaying these tapes, and we can remember things in the past. But what he discovered, and other people are talking about now too, is the fact that the same thing happens in the future. So we have access to information in the future using the exact same techniques or the exact same neural circuits as we do from the past. Now, to me, this is profound, and it explains in a nutshell why, if you want to be successful in your life, and most of us do, the key ingredient is to have a goal. Well, what's a goal? A goal is a future destination. So if you have a goal and you focus on that goal and you think about it and you write down reasons why you want it and maybe ideas of how you can get it and things like that, what it does is it taps into this future memory idea, and you start to get more and more information about this possible future that's available to you. So again, the combination of future memory, positive thinking, changing your emotional set point so that you feel more positive and more confident, that, I believe, is the real key to success.
Can we, let's say as a society we want to move in a positive direction.
Right.
I'll take an issue that's important to me, let's say income inequality. We want to become a more egalitarian society. As a society, we move in a direction like that?
Well, I think we have to. We have to. And this was the point that I picked up on when I was watching your previous show about the new paradigm, you know. If we can envision the future, then we can create it. Now, certainly on an individual level, that's true. I'm sure that before you had this show, you had the idea of the show. And before I wrote my book, I had the idea of the book. So everything that we create, from this chair that I'm sitting in, to the book here, to the coffee cup, to the camera, everything that we create, this building that we're sitting in, it started off as an idea. So the idea or the vision has to come first. Now, of course, the problem is I can envision a society where there's more equality, and so can you. And if enough people envision that, perhaps we can influence the politicians to change the laws to help make it happen. But of course, a lot of the income inequality comes from the financial system and the economic model that we use, which is pretty strong, pretty powerful, right? I mean, the corporations and the banks and the financial institutions, they have a profit motive that may not motivate us. So I believe that we have to create the vision first. We have to have that idea of what we want. And if we all have, if enough of us have that idea, then we can help to bring it about.
Well, I certainly agree with all of that. Your book is about what's called, I guess, personal development.
That's right, yeah. So my book is called Mind, Time, and Power. And so the idea then is it's about the mind. It's about time, you know, the future memory idea, using your past as a resource. So when I think of my daughter, I feel good. When you think of your successes that you've had in the past, you feel good. So that's using the past as a resource. Having goals, things that you want to achieve in your life, that's using the future as a resource. So that's where the time comes in. And the power part of it is that we need to train ourselves to use our imagination, to hold in our minds the kind of goals that we have. So in simple terms, creative visualization, meditation, you know, mind power, that's where the power comes in. So if I hold in my mind a vision of a new business, or a new apartment that I want to move into, or a new book that I want to write, if I hold that vision in there, which takes discipline, takes practice, that will give me the ideas and the motivation, hopefully, that will put me on the path to bringing that about. So the idea then is using your mind and understanding the idea of future memory and past memory and neuroplasticity together creates this new paradigm for personal empowerment that I'm talking about.
So you have the book. Is this your first or second or only?
This is my main book. I have a few other things. I have a book on how to quit smoking. I have a book I wrote with a guy named Brian Tracy that you might have heard of. He's from Victoria, but he's a very well-known international business trainer. So we combined on a book with a few other people, which became an international bestseller on Amazon. I have a book called Mental Magic, which is about personal motivation. But this is the one that I'm most proud of. It's my most recent one.
You've also got I think stuff on the internet for sure, a website.
Yeah, that's right. AnthonyHamilton.org is my website. I have about 60 videos on YouTube, and I get a lot of feedback from people who've seen the videos on YouTube, the same as the one you described. Yeah.
And so people can read the book. Do you do classes or training, that kind of thing?
Yeah, most of what I do, I used to be a university professor, and before that I was a corporate trainer. I worked with real estate companies, life insurance companies, doing sales training and motivation training. I worked with the Jimmy Patterson Group for a while, for example, as a freelancer. But most of what I do is either success coaching, working with entrepreneurs. I do quite a bit of work now on the internet. But I travel and do lectures and workshops and trainings as well. And it's all based on the information in the book.
You know, there might be a whole new market of people like me out there who aren't entrepreneurs or business people, but, you know, like if we could envision a better society and if that could help us move towards it,
oh, absolutely.
that seems like an idea whose time had better come pretty quickly.
An idea whose time has come. And when you think about problems that we have in society, whether it's drugs or unemployment, you know, it's amazing how often the problem comes down to one of feeling. People don't know how to feel good. You know, people feel depressed, they get angry, they get frustrated. And because we get confused by this connection between the inner world and the outer world, we look at the outer world and try and change it. You know, if I just had that, I'd be happy. If I could just find this kind of person, I'd feel successful, I'd feel loved. But we really have to start on the inside, because when you create the feeling of success or happiness or being loved on the inside, using your past, for example, as a resource, then the feelings change, the emotions change, and your world changes. So you see more opportunities when you start from the inside out.
Okay. And I think you told me the first step that I can take is write down 5, 10, or 15 good things and read them over. Okay,
it sounds simple, and it is simple.
It is simple.
But it works.
Yeah. If it wasn't simple, I couldn't do it. Yeah. Anthony Hamilton, thank you very, very much for doing this. And thank you, folks, for watching Citizens Forum this week.
Thank you so much, Jack.